going to Oakland is. Oakland is spotlights, movers, shakers, and image makers. We truly have such a person with us today. Her name is Miss Charlie Toledo. She is the Executive Director of the Susquehanna Council, our Intertribal Council. And I believe they're located in Northern California.
Right, in Napa.
Napa. And one of the things that I have noticed about Ms. Toledo, the power of a single individual, the power of one. It does not take a whole army or a whole battalion to make something happen. And personal responsibility. And I really enjoy talking with you every time I've ever spoken with you. And today we want to address global warming. What is that actually? Could you tell us?
Well, global warming is the carbon levels going higher and higher and taking the temperatures higher. And people think that global warming means just the Earth getting hotter, but it actually means that it's getting unstable. So it goes to more extremes, which we're seeing. The storms come more frequently and they're more intense. And what we're moving into, what we've had are regional storms, and as global warming increases, the mean temperature of the Earth goes higher and higher. Those storms get more and more violent and more frequent, and they become larger. What we'll be seeing as global warming increases is global storms rather than just regional storms.
If that's what we're experiencing across the world, how does personal responsibility fit into that picture?
Well, I think like we were talking earlier, that there is no they. You know, I think a lot of us get inactive by saying they should do this, they should do that, they could, and there is no they. Right. If we really come to the idea, there is no they, there's only us.
Only us.
And there's only each of us. And then we ask the question, what can I do?
Each one.
What can I do? And I think in relationship, I don't know that we as humans can do anything to stop global warming. We can, you know, according to some studies and personal things, we can slow it down. But it's something that's happened in the cyclical aspect of the Earth, that the Earth, the mean temperature gets higher and higher, the glaciers melt, the ocean levels go higher and higher. So coastal cities like San Francisco and New York City will start going on, start being submerged. But what happens then at one point is this one current in the on the East Coast, it actually will stop and then reverse itself if there's so much fresh water that gets input into that. And once that happens, it shoots all the warm air up into the stratosphere and draws down all the cold air. So what happens overnight really is the ice age. And the world has experienced, I think, 3 or 4 ice ages. And that was, of course, before humans had a big footprint. But the carbon that we're producing through using cars and the using of petrochemicals is sort of speeding up that process of global warming.
Human beings do affect this.
They affect it, and some people agree and disagree that humans can affect it. You know, some believe that humans, that we don't have any effect at all, and that's just the cycle that we're going back into.
So if it's a cycle and we can't have an impact, then why would one want to be responsible?
I think just to improve the quality of life that we have on Earth
while we're
now.
here.
Right.
While we're here. Really realizing that the reality is life is not all that long anyway.
Right.
But while we're here, we have responsibility to
the other life forms that we share the Earth with.
And therefore, we should.
As Native Americans, we believe there's one water.
One water.
One air.
One air.
One Earth. And I think when you hear that, and you see that a lot, Chief Seattle's words, they say one Earth, one water, but to really understand that means one water, and that's what we were talking about, these islands of trash that are in the ocean. If you throw your trash away, there's that idea that you can throw it away. But if you realize there's one water, one air, you can't throw anything away. One Earth, there's no away.
I see.
And somebody had said, well, why don't we, if we know those islands of trash are out there, why don't we go and throw them away? And I'm thinking, throw them away to where?
As you describe this, I'm thinking about a television show. I know you don't watch television. There's a show called Clean House, and it's about going to deal with the clutter that has accumulated in different houses. And sometimes it's due to a loss in the family, a death, or something like that. People are not able to get their life together. So just clutter begins to accumulate. So in a sense, some of the things need to be thrown out, but throwing it out is an issue also, because you're saying trash, there's no trash. or what do we do with our trash?
Right. What do we do with our trash?
So
And I
they
think
have a sale for the things that they're getting rid of, and they sell them off to the community in the neighborhood. So, and then they start all over.
And then you can also recycle. But I think there's a larger step to that of there was a time in some people's lives, I know in my parents' life, that they didn't generate trash.
I see.
Trash is something of the industrialized nation. That's a modern concept.
Right.
Pre-industrialized nation, I think really in the 1970s is when we started really generating lots and lots of trash. Before that, there wasn't that much trash. You didn't have the plastic, and plastic is a petrochemical. That means you take precious limited oil from the center of the earth, bring it up, turn it into fuel, but also turn it into plastic. You can't make plastic without oil.
As you mentioned the oil spill that's going on right now, how is that going to relate to personal responsibility?
Well, I think you know, my personal take on that, because a lot of people have said, what can we do about
Yes.
that? And I think what we're already doing is trying to limit our use of oil, to start to switch to other fuel sources, renewable sources. But what's happening, the earth in a very large way is showing us, the little kids, the two-leggeds are like the little kids that run on the surface of the earth. And she's allowed us to explore all of our potential. And in that, just like a young mother would let a small child fall.
Yes.
And I know with my kids, when they were little, I let them fall in the pool so that they would realize what water was. Of course, I was close by and I pulled them back up right away.
Right.
But I let them fall, and then they did never fall in the pool again, because they knew if you play at the edge of the pool and fall in, if you don't know how to swim, you're going to be in a situation. So I believe the earth has said, okay, you can play. Well, now we've created a situation. We're living too close to the water's edge, rivers and oceans. And then we can't go and from the bottom of the ocean be pulling stuff up from we can't do it. What's going to get harmed the most is us, the two-leggeds.
So then you're saying being a human being means that we need to just come to a reality focus? Is that it?
Yeah, a grown-up to mature.
And that's what personal responsibility
Right.
is.
Mature in relationship to all the other life forms that we share this earth with. And see, now, with those oceans of plastic that are out there, you know, the Pacific coast, they're the size of Texas.
Oh my.
And it's all of these plastic articles that we've thrown into the ocean. It's all these currents have created these huge islands. And I guess there's some in the southern hemisphere and the northern hemisphere, but where the currents push. So they're literally out in the middle of the ocean. They've only been seen from satellite, that they're these state-sized islands of garbage. So what's happening to them, the sea life is eating it. They think, oh, that looks like a jellyfish. You know, it's creating diseases in the whales. It's creating, the seagulls are taking the plastic and feeding it to their babies because they're thinking it's food.
Yes.
And the babies aren't growing. So there'll be less fish, less plankton, less seagulls. So that will affect us eventually.
Yes, I'm thinking about the research work that goes on in America and probably all over the world to discover new cures for different illnesses, and the things that we previously took are no longer good because we discovered that 20 years later it was not good for us. Therefore, as a human being, we're always into this mode of revising our thinking, but also creating some trash. Right. In the sense of throwing away something. So what do you think about that?
Right. I think, you know, when I traveled to Mexico in the 1960s and 70s, there wasn't trash there. You would buy something and you'd have a woven basket or a cloth basket, and you'd just be buying your produce with no packaging, and you'd weigh it and then put it into your basket. And then you'd cook your food, and there was nothing to throw away. There was no packaging.
Yes.
But now with fast foods and stuff, there is packaging. So as much as possible that we don't accept packaging. And I think there's some cities that are starting to say no plastic because of these plastic islands, and the plastic does not break down. Somebody suggested, well, we could go haul all that plastic out of the ocean and then bury it. Well, that's going to again pollute the earth. And then if we recycled it, that is something. You know, if we said all the plastic that now exists on the earth, let's recycle it to the end of its life and then find alternatives. With paper, they're finding that you can make paper products with cornstarch. Well, cornstarch is from corn. That's a renewable source. You can grow corn every year, 3 times a year, and then it biodegrades into fertilizer. You could literally put it into your garden. It'll biodegrade and protect your plants.
Well, what I found very resourceful, I spent a summer in France. I was as a French teacher in eastern France. And the family, the father had been worked in the silk factory, but the wife would prepare the meals. But she'd go down every morning and buy the things for the day, and all of the food had to be eaten that day. There was no refrigerator. So the food had to be all consumed. So all the leftovers were placed into a soup at the end of the day. So that fits into this model that you're describing.
Right, or just how a lot of us grew up. I was born in 1950. I used to take a lunch pail, you know, and then this plastic paper that I wrapped, or the wax paper,
Yes.
that I would wrap the sandwich in, we'd bring the wax paper home and use it to the end of the week, and then that got put into something else, you know, it would be, you know, so it really got its use out of it. And we weren't generating trash at every turn.
And also the French bread was never wrapped.
Right,
that
you
was
just-
the other thing. They
right.
would ride it on
It's
the
just in a
bicycle under
basket.
the arm, you know, or something like that. And I thought, oh my goodness, the germs that might accumulate, but then that didn't seem to matter because I guess the body could take care of that.
Right, it does.
Yeah. Now we're also concerned in America about a lot of germs on doorknobs and things like that. What do you think about that?
Well, I think we have to be careful.
We have to be careful.
Yeah, and you could, you know, instead of using a paper towel, I just go like this on my own clothing and
We were told
open
to
the door
cough into
before I
our
wash.
arms, you know, that
I know, I'm
kind
feeling
of
a
thing.
cough coming on.
Yeah, cough
And
coming on, yes.
Excuse
So
me.
where do we put the trash? That is a good topic. Where do we put the trash?
Well, I think we take a step further back, we don't generate the trash. And we would just be taking a step back to the 1950s or the
Do not
1940s
generate it. Yes.
in the United States.
Uh-huh.
In Mexico and some countries, it would just be a step back 10 years.
Yes, so that ties in with the cluttering idea too.
Right.
Not having things that are not needed.
And I think the idea of a green economy or a green ecology, that's meaning, that's having and broadening our thinking to what kind of impact are we having on the earth?
Now you mentioned something to me earlier about 13 indigenous grandmothers. That was fascinating.
Right, so there's 13 indigenous, and that's not something I did. There's a group of people actually in San Francisco that had this woman had this vision and to bring 13 grandmothers together, and that's what they've done. I think it was about 5 years ago, and there's a website. If you type in 13 grandmothers or 13 indigenous grandmothers, they're from each continent on the earth, and they're coming together to share their collective wisdom to help bring the earth back into balance and away from the brink of what they believe is destruction.
Where did they come to? New York, San Francisco?
They travel, you know, they came, I actually don't know that much about them. I get emails, I'm on the listserv with the indigenous grandmothers, and I've seen one or two of them speak occasionally. They come from all the different continents, and the first time they came together in the Iroquois Nation over in the East Coast. And then what they decided from that meeting was to travel to each of their home countries and visit each other in their homelands, which one of the women's from the rainforest and the Amazon, and another woman's from Guatemala, and another woman is from Arizona, the Southwest, and there's a woman from Africa, and I'm forgetting what country.
Are you one of the grandmothers?
No, I'm not. No, because I don't have that international influence. Most of them have spent their whole lives, and they're in their 70s and their 80s.
It's hard to believe you do not have that international experience or exposure, because something you just told me earlier about going to East Africa and to Afghanistan.
Right. Well, I have done that, you know, as an
Recently.
individual in those last 10 years.
Yes.
And I think that's where one of the things we were talking about is people think they. And you don't realize me, I.
Yes.
What can I do? And as individuals, we can travel into war-torn areas and try to understand what the problem is and help.
How does that feel, traveling into Afghanistan?
War-torn areas. It feels good. You know what? The best thing for me in Afghanistan and in Uganda, the women said the same thing. We traveled around and visited women in their and did documentaries of things that they were successful things that they were doing to help themselves and to help each other. And what they said to us repeatedly was it was so heartwarming and invigorating and validating for them that people in the other parts of the world thought about them, because they were in such dire straits and they're suffering so much. They thought the world had forgotten about them. And they just felt so lifted up to know that people took time out of their lives at our own costs and arrangements. We got our own passports and visas, and then we went into these areas to create documentaries. And we actually helped organize. In Afghanistan, we were helping organize the women.
Right.
In Uganda, we were really going to listen, because they have an organization model that's just to die for, really, which is what they've done, unfortunately.
Really?
After Idi Amin,
You say
women,
unfortunately or
well, that they've
fortunately?
literally, unfortunately, that they've literally had to die to learn the lessons that they've learned.
Oh, that was the unfortunate part.
The unfortunate part is they literally are dying. I
Yes.
said they have a model to die for, which they have died for. But in their strength and their resiliency, they created a constitution after the Idi Amin years, the men, women, and children, and they guaranteed human rights for men, women, and children, and that women have to be represented. Every is it 30%? 30% of every office, whether it's at the state, county, or city level, has to have 30% women, 50% men, and 20% youth. And youth is between 18 and 25.
Oh.
And so, and that's a constitution. That means if they have an election and those percentages aren't there, they have to redo the election.
Is that right?
And that's the copy of the Constitution that we carried to Afghanistan. We translated it into Farsi and took that in and met with the women leaders that they were doing their Lurjurga, their constitutional making. So we carried that example to them. And they actually did work some of those aspects into their Constitution, that 30% of the women in Afghanistan, according to their Constitution, have to be women.
So in America, are we in accord with those percentages?
No. Oh, no.
How far off are we?
We're way off. We guarantee human rights for men.
Yes, and women are increasing their numbers, so don't we need that
Well, we do. In fact, when the Ugandan women came here, because what we did was we would travel to other countries, then we brought delegations of women here to California for them to be exposed to the leadership and the, what the society's done here. But the Ugandan women were really disappointed because that was the first year that Bush got elected, and they knew that he wasn't elected by majority. And so they said, well, what are you going to do about it? And they realized we weren't going to do anything, that we really didn't have the power to do anything. We didn't have the constitutional capacity. We didn't have the legal capacity to really influence it. So what they used to say was, oh, in America they have this constitution that gives them the right to vote, but their vote doesn't always count. And they have a very old constitution, so they need to make a new one. And that's what they said, because our Constitution was old. Because if you read the Constitution, it says in there, we guarantee every man, and you can read in there, white man, it literally. Because then, for black people to get a right to vote, they had to, have a revolution and then sue. And then women had to do the same thing. Women had to fight for the right to vote. And it wasn't, it was a generation ago that was happening.
So then that
people have forgotten.
So America needs that as well as Uganda.
Kind of an updating.
And Afghanistan.
And I think when people think of human rights, they think of faraway places, people being tortured. But actually, one aspect of human rights is environmental protection. And that means that we have the right to breathe clean air, we have the right to have clean water, and have the right to have clean, unpoisoned earth where we can grow our food. Those are human rights.
Yes.
And we're collectively, globally, losing those rights, because as we pollute the one air and the water, then our children might not have access to clean water.
That's right.
And clean air.
Yes. So then in terms of the generations that we have in America, for example, how are you addressing our issues in America?
Well, I think what we're doing as an organization, what I'm doing personally, is we're developing this Native American Cultural Center, and we're actually going back to taking a combination of traditional building, earth building, with earthen floors and earthen walls. And we've got through the Napa County Building Department to approve building permits for this project, which has taken about 10 years. And we want to have it be as a living model, how you take earth and rock right from where this building site is to create a sound, earthquake-proof house that protects you from the weather. When it's hot, it's cool, it's naturally cool. And when it's warm, or when it's cold, it's naturally warm. The walls are earthen and they're 2 feet thick, so they actually cools and warms you. So, and those are biodegradable. You were not having to transport the materials from across the world or across they're literally just coming right from the site. So we're creating a living model of how. Well, you put a roof on it, so then, and there's actually, when you mix the earth with lime and sand and then the roof overhangs enough so that the rain doesn't actually hit the building, it doesn't biodegrade.
I see.
It starts breaking down when the roof gets removed. If the roof got taken off or something, then that would. We built a small model, and we're still raising the money to finish the whole center, but that's going to be a living center where people can come and stay and look and see. And we've already had other builders come out to look, and they see these earthen walls, and they go like this, they touch them, because they think if they touch it, it's going to fall apart.
Yes. So like a cookie, or a gingerbread cookie, or something like that.
It's like a cookie, or it's like baking the bread really, really hard.
So where's it located?
In Childs Pope Valley, which is the northeastern part of Napa
Say that again,
County.
please.
Childs, or what it looks like is Chili's Pope Valley, which is the northeastern part of Napa County.
Okay, and it's easy to find?
Well, it's not, if you know where it is, it's easy to find. It's right along the road. Right now, it's not finished as a center, but once it is finished, then it will be open to the public as a learning model. We're still developing it.
Yes, we need to know where that is so we could come and see it.
And what it is just creating, so we'll be off the grid. There'll be a direct The electricity will be solar with a direct current, which means it doesn't create an electromagnetic field.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Because when we have these lights, when we have all this electricity, it creates an electromagnetic field that disturbs our electromagnetic field.
Oh my.
And the electromagnetic fields of the different birds, and you know, like how birds aren't migrating anymore.
Oh.
That's because the magnetic field of the Earth is changing, and it's being so changed by all the electricity grids that we have, especially through North America.
And I was reading about radiation and how it can be, if you have a lot of X-rays and things of that sort, it can be not healthy for the body.
Right.
And that it can also impact other people who come into proximity, too close. So it sounds as though we have so many things to look at.
We do have so many things. And so I think that each person asks themselves, what can I do?
Yes.
And you do what you feel called to do, because if each person is doing what they feel they can do, there's some people that are saying, in my city, I'm going to make it so that people don't use plastic bags anymore, trash bags.
All right.
And they reduce the waste. That every little small step, we said that the smallest step can make the largest difference. And I think for a lot of us, we can't think, well, we can't change the whole world. And so then you just keep watching TV and with your clicker. But if you think, no, what can I do?
Yes.
What can I do? What do I feel like I want to do? And what will I enjoy doing? And deep sea divers, I mean, they could go out to those islands of trash and start hauling them back here so that we could recycle them.
Well, as you talk, I think about Margaret Mead. It seems as though she was someone who went around the world believing that she as a single individual could make a big difference. And then she has a quote I've heard people use, that it never is a large group that makes this happen.
Right. And when you go into world governments, like I told you, we met President Karzai and we met Museveni when we were in Uganda. When you meet people, they're in offices, but it's just an individual person, just like we're all very ordinary when we get face to face. And so then you think, well, that person has this and this, and they don't. It's just a person. But when you get to the real where the decisions are being made, it is always 3 to 5 people that are doing most of the work and creating those big changes.
Yes.
And then if everybody's just really passive and not doing anything, then we just get along a path to our own self-destruction. We're being led along a path.
So then why do you think it's important that we place confidence in our leaders?
I think it's important that we place confidence in ourselves and become our own leaders. There's a cliche that says, you're the person you've been waiting for.
Yes.
You know, we sort of wait for somebody to save us.
And you're the change that you want to see in the world.
You're the change that you want to see. And I think that history shows that the leaders have never saved us. It's the people that lead and the leaders follow.
Okay.
And I believe that that's true, that when you see most of the environmental shifts that are occurring in the United States, or especially just even in California, the greening back, kind of going back to the pre-industrial age where we were living in more agrarian styles, which was a sustainable, meaning that it could sustain us. What's happened now is that we've used up most of the water. And people don't realize that we're in the midst right now of a global water crisis.
Oh, wow.
And that's why that human rights issue of having access to clean water, we have been digging water from underwater fields, bodies of water, lakes of water, rivers of water that were created in the Ice Age. And once that water's gone, it's gone.
Well, I'm thinking about the oil that's getting into the water.
Well, we're going to run out of water before we run out of oil, and the oil's getting into the seawater.
So we'll drink the oil then?
No, we'll probably just be dying in large numbers.
So the oil will take over the water?
Well, that's in the seawater. Right now what's happening with the oil, see, that's a cause. That's not the cause, that's a result. It's a result of our industrialized addiction to oil that's creating, you know, these industries to search further and deeper, and we really are going into places we weren't intended to go.
Right.
By any standards, because, you know, BP is saying that, oh, they can clean it up, but they can't clean it up. They're not cleaning it up, and they have no way of stopping it. They're basically letting it bleed out. But that oil under the earth actually is substance. It's just like, you know, this chair that we're sitting on, it's substance that was holding us. But if you take that huge body of oil out from under the earth, then it'll implode. There'll be sinkholes. And that's what's happening with the aquifers. That water's all used up, then the earth is just creating all these big sinkholes.
Well.
So with the oil, that's one situation where we have to, I think it's really big. And what the 13 grandmothers say, and what I personally, you know, in my own meditations, when I thought, what is the what's the lesson in this? It's that it's got to be this really big lesson that shows the world, you know, you guys are out of oil. You have to stop this addiction and find a sustainable source of fuel.
That's the lesson. Well, then with that lesson, then it could be you're thinking we will not be unable to drink the water.
Well, see, we don't drink seawater. Right now, it's out in the ocean.
Out in the ocean.
The water that most of us get, like in the Bay Area, fortunately, we're close to our water.
Okay.
And the water here comes from Lake Berryessa, from Napa County, and from the Sacramento Delta.
Yes.
And it's hosed in here, but that water's disappearing. The sources of that water is disappearing.
Yes. This is why I think talking with you is so refreshing, because it's better than a cool glass of water. Because you know you have the knowledge and information, and you're about sharing that with the world. And as an individual, you're making a big difference. I really think that's phenomenal. You're a phenomenal person, and I really think you really make people listen. They want to hear what you have to say.
Well, I hope so.
Yes, you've been doing this for years, I would imagine.
Well, actually, my whole life. Yeah, I think even as a really small child, at 3, I realized
at 3?
Yeah, that we could make a difference.
At 3 years old.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for
thank
sharing.
you. I really appreciate the opportunity to come here.
Starting at 3.